All right. Good Friday evening, everybody. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Lowdown College Basketball Offseason coverage. As always, got at TM Swish with us. If you want to hit him up on Twitter, you can do that. Hitting off tees, draining threes. I am at NG Triplet. And of course, if you want to interact with our Twitter page specific for college basketball, it's at the Lowdown CBB. So please jump on, join the conversation. Hopefully you're watching us live tonight. We are part of the Lowdown Network, and we are wanting to make sure that we are the place for you to come where you get the lowdown on all things in college basketball. All right, so let's get right to it. Tons of things going on this week. Obviously, the draft is maybe first and foremost in everybody's mind. But what do you got for us this week, T-Mac? Let's kick things off and talk a little college basketball.
Let's do it, baby. I'm pumped. Good to see you again, as always, Coach Tripp. Big thanks to the Lowdown Network for allowing us to be here and make this broadcast possible. We also want to thank, I know, all of our wonderful friends over at SeatGeek and Fanatics as well for allowing us to broadcast here live tonight, Friday, June 23rd. But we'll talk a little college hoops for you guys. Man, there's been a lot of other stuff going on, like you said, Tripp, around the world of sports. You know, we got the draft last night, and we'll get into that a little bit. We've got golf going on. We got more majors and whatnot. You know, football is right around the corner, so it's one of the more fun moments for off-season basketball right now, because we sure got a lot of content to talk about, and we got a lot of the other sports to knock out as well. So, but man, how about this, Coach Tripp? We'll kick things off with the recent coaching news. Man, there's been a lot of coaching stuff going on. You being a coach yourself, nice to see you're staying out of trouble here, and you're living off season pretty good. You're staying out of trouble, but
yeah, man, I definitely want to avoid some of these pitfalls and issues that some of these college coaches have had recently, and it's a shame to see some of this. Obviously, we're about to jump into it and talk about it, but it really runs the gamut. You know, we've got DWI, we've got recruiting violations. And then there is some positive, obviously, with the reward of UConn's coach. So, but man, what a crazy, you know, most of this happened since last week when we had our first episode, and all of a sudden, you know, you're hoping that colleges and fans can be focusing on maybe additions that their team has made, you know, people committing, portal, that kind of stuff. And instead, it's a little bit of a black eye for the sport and for these schools in particular. So let's get to it, man. Who do you want to start with first?
Well, let's go ahead and knock the first coach who no longer has a job. It wasn't fired, but we'll talk off with one of the legends right here, Bob Huggins, who we all know. And if you're a fan of Big 12 basketball, you know the kind of legend he is. If you're a fan of college basketball in general, you know the legend that Bob Huggins is up there in Morgantown with the West Virginia Mountaineers. As anybody knows, it was a week ago today, men's basketball coach up there in West Virginia, Bob Huggins, was arrested Friday night. He was over in nearby Pittsburgh. You know, there's not too much going on in West Virginia, so you got to get out of the state, head on over to Pittsburgh. He was unfortunately arrested driving under the influence of alcohol. He informed the team. He a day later on Saturday, he went ahead and told the team that he was going to retire. Coach Tripp, we'll go into some of his quotes here shortly, but man, what a surprise here from, you know, Bob Huggins, who, you know, just a month ago already got in a little bit of trouble for some comments he made on a radio show. But, you know, what's your first reaction? You know, yourself being a coach, being in basketball for a long time. What are your reaction to Bob Huggins?
My initial reaction is, if this is you know, someone who's not a coach, we as a society, and particularly maybe for some of the young men that play college basketball, we are very forgiving. We give second chances. But in this instance, I think maybe he made the right decision. Obviously, as you said, he had been in a little hot water, and really, you know, right or wrong, as the coach, you are held to a higher standard. You should be setting the example for what we want these young men to do that are in your charge. And Certainly, I think that if he really wanted to stay, I think he probably could have worked that out somehow. But I mean, he's had a fantastic on the court career. The numbers speak for themselves. We kind of talked about that a little bit last week. If it was whether he was kind of forced out and they call it a resignation, or he resigned on his own, I think it's probably the right move. And I like to see that he's able to kind of make the call, or at least the perception is that he did this on his own, not being forced out. It doesn't appear at this point that there's any animosity or ugliness between the university and coach. So I certainly wish him the best, and hopefully he'll learn from this and never make that mistake, because the potential consequences are horrific.
Yeah, this is a guy right here who's the third time winningest coach of all time, in Division I. He's got 935 wins. I believe he only trails Jim Boeheim and Coach K in career wins. So this is the kind of guy right here who is probably going to have a little bit of a longer leash than others. Unfortunately for him, I think he was given that leash about a month ago when he went on and made some comments on a radio show. We won't get too much into that, but making the remarks a month ago, I think he was probably given a second chance by the university. Look, like, this guy can coach. We might want to give him a second chance. This guy, he made a mistake saying some comments out loud he shouldn't have said, but here he is 1 month, just about a month later, making another silly mistake. And probably, the university, like you said, gave him the benefit of the doubt, letting him go ahead and resign before they officially, had to fire him. I think if he had probably, given any resistance or said, no, I'm not leaving, he probably would have eventually led to a firing, which, is unfortunate, like I said, for the third time most winning coach of all time with Cincinnati, West Virginia. He's been all over college basketball. And this is a guy right here who, kids look up to, and if you've got your head coach out here making mistakes like that, the kids, you follow in their footsteps. If they see their coach making mistakes, who's gonna stop these kids from making the same kind of mistakes? So, he probably made the right decision by stepping down. It's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate situation. But Coach Tripp, I did want to ask you this. Gave a little bit of a tease in our cover photo. If you were waiting to get into the show on YouTube, Twitch, however you're watching YouTube, do you think coaches, and maybe it was worded not particularly the best way I worded it when I was putting the show together, but do you think coaches and players are now maybe not Bob Huggins in this situation? A DUI is, like you said, pretty darn serious. You can take a life doing that. We've seen, Andy Reid's son, a few years ago, right before the Super Bowl, a tragic accident. So we've seen coaches recently make these kind of mistakes. But I do want to ask, with the wake of, Ja Morant up in the NBA, being suspended, do you think coaches and players are fairly scrutinized, put under a microscope for every little mistake they made? Now, this is not a little mistake, but it just, it was the kind of thing I wanted to bring up. Are coaches and players, are they fairly put under a bigger microscope for every little thing that they do?
It's a fair question, and I think that you have to look at the circumstances, the times that we live in. 30 years ago, there was no social media, so some of these instances may, not the DWI necessarily, but some of these other instances where people are being vilified on social media, and then there's pressure on these universities, didn't happen. Maybe it was much more localized. So as a result, any infraction is magnified. It is all over social media. But I don't think it's just players and coaches, because you see it sometimes where you'll see a story where somebody who worked at an investment firm did something terrible, and they were let go as well. So I think the idea is, one, we want our coaches and players to set a good example, to be great ambassadors for their university. But also we understand that college athletics is big business. And if you have an employee, or in this case, or in a case, it could be a player who does something that negatively or potentially negatively impacts that brand, I think that there's going to be some consequences. So fair or not is a great question, because I don't know if I would say fair, but I say it's the reality. and people have to understand that when they're going out in public, fair or not, people are going to recognize them, and people are probably going to be taking pictures of them, maybe videoing them. Now, look, that doesn't happen to you or I. So, yes, maybe that's not fair, but there's also these guys are stars, they're making a lot of money. So, with great power comes great responsibility. And so, fair or not, I guess I couldn't answer as kind of a cop-out, but it's the reality. And so they've got to deal with it and be smarter with some of these decisions, particularly Ja Morant. I mean, happening almost the same type of instance twice, after a tremendous backlash the first time. So,
and of course, we've got, like we said, NBA draft coming up. We've got, Brandon Miller as well, the number 2 overall pick from the University of Alabama, same kind of situation. I'll kind of answer my own question. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. It's a yes and no kind of thing. Contemplated, whether or not I wanted to bring up Ja Morant, but someone like himself, I feel for him a little bit, because at the end of the day, he didn't break a law. And he didn't break any kind of law, at least with the second incident. I wasn't so sure. I didn't touch up too much on the first incident where a gun was brought out. But, the second incident, he was concealed in his own vehicle. And, and I'll say this, where's the NRA? Where are all these people that are, why aren't you going to bat for Ja Morant in this situation? I'm like, you're outspoken. Our country is so for guns. I've got my personal opinions. I don't want to turn this into a political show or anything. I've got my personal opinions, with guns and other laws. But, where's the NRA? Where's all the other people going to bat for Ja Morant in this situation? And, I think more than anything, the NBA probably didn't suspend him for that. It was probably for, like you're saying, these guys are ambassadors. The Grizzlies, the NBA are sitting here thinking, maybe it wasn't the best look that Ja Morant was, waving a gun around. It's not the fact that he didn't break the law. It's the fact that, it might have been a bad look. And, it's the same thing for Bob Huggins, the University of West Virginia. It's like, maybe it's not the best interest that we have a coach that is out here getting a DUI. Now, of course, he was arrested and he did break the law, but, he's probably not going to go to jail. He'll probably have to, pay a fine and, whatnot. I especially if it's a first time offense, he might have to go on some kind of probation. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a law student or anything, but, I'm sure Bob Huggins won't have to serve any time in jail or anything. Probably just have to pay a fine. But yeah, at the end of the day, I remember back when I was a student athlete at A&M Commerce, you being a coach, a longtime coach, you drill it in your student athletes, you guys are ambassadors of the school. You guys, every little thing you do, even if, like myself, just being a golfer, make a silly decision out in public, that's a bad look on the athletic department, for yourself, like your students. If you go out and make a bad decision, that's a bad look on the high school right there. So it's a cop-out answer for me as well. It's kind of 50-50. I'm like, I feel bad for Ja Morant because he didn't break the law, but at the same time, it might have been a bad look. Bob Huggins, I feel bad for him. He's been in the business a long time. He makes 1-2 silly mistakes in the last month, and just like that, he's done coaching. So I don't know, man. It's a debate you could go back and forth for forever with.
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, let's go on. We got some other coaching news to talk about. Other things. Some positive, some other negative ones. I don't know where you want to start.
Let's after dwelling on that topic for so long, let's do some positive news right here.
All right.
How about this right here? Dan Hurley, of course, the famous basketball family of Hurleys there. Dan Hurley, the reigning national champion, 2-time national champion at UConn, gets $33 million in a new deal. So, right after leading UConn to a national championship, UConn rewards their coach with a 6-year, $33 million contract, putting him among one of the highest paid coaches in men's basketball. The contract's going to go through the 2029 season. It also includes incentives for athletic and academics success that could push the full value of the deal even higher. So how about that, Coach Tripp? Dan Hurley getting himself a new contract.
So, man, you look at what he's done there. He is 104-55 at UConn. and he's been there since 2018. They were 31-8 this past season.
Just one, my mistake. Just the one championship. I said two, I think.
Okay.
Just the one championship for Hurley.
But anyway, man, listen. What he's done is fantastic. He's built that program or continued. Obviously, they've got a rich tradition of basketball success, men's and women's, obviously. But the fact that we talked about it before, when you can get some stability, when you have the guy who is proven he can do it, he just won you a national. Why wouldn't you reward him? Why wouldn't you take all doubt away of, look, we're gonna pay you a king's ransom to show you we want you right here in Connecticut. And I think that builds some loyalty. I think it definitely is a big deal with the recruiting, because recruits know that he's going to be there. Now look, obviously coaches leave before the end of the contract, but at least for the foreseeable future, they know he's going to be there. So I think it's a great move on their part. Congratulations, Dan Hurley, and congratulations, UConn. And let's see if he can follow this up. But I think it's a really smart move on their part, and it benefits everyone all the way around.
I think it's a great move by UConn, and I'll say this due in part. I don't think he's necessarily getting this extension, this new contract, due in part for just winning a national championship this past year. I think he is getting rewarded for, we've talked about this, I believe before. I think we had an episode right before March Madness dropped. I know you weren't able to be with us on that one, but we talked about UConn has, under the radar, become a dynasty. I mean, they've won five championships since 1999. I think due in part this contract is partially given to Dan Hurley, because maybe this fifth championship, maybe it's unfair to Jim Calhoun and whatnot, who got the ball rolling there at UConn. But, I think maybe this contract's due in part to, I think this last championship might have solidified UConn becoming a dynasty. You've got Jim Calhoun, you've got Kevin Ollie, now you've got Dan Hurley. These three fantastic coaches right here have accumulated for 5 championships since 1999. There's not too many programs. You've got your Kentuckys, you've got your Dukes, you've got your Kansases. You look at Kansas, just the 2 championships since in the last few years. You've got Kentucky with Calipari, just the 1 championship since he's been there at Kentucky. So you've got some of these guys right here. Bill Self, like I mentioned, he just has the 2 championships. And UConn now has 5 since 1999, and it's almost like nobody's talked about it. So I think this is due in part, but maybe this contract was rewarded because UConn has now solidified themselves as a dynasty. I guess if you can say that go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make a parallel here to our good friend Drew Ivey. 5 championships that UConn has matches the 5 championships that the San Antonio Spurs have. And so I know Drew's going to be really excited about that. So just want to throw that out there. If you're listening, Drew, love you. We got you.
Yeah, of course. Tripp and I being down here in South Texas, Central Texas, we're not too far from the 210. We're fired up about our Spurs right there. I know Drew and BJ up there in the Metroplex are our friends on the other show are pretty fired up about us getting that number 1 pick up there. So sorry, Mavs fans, you guys still get Luka. He's pretty darn good, but we get Wemby, baby. All right, let's move on. More coaching news. We'll go to Penny Hardaway, Coach Tripp. I'm not sure if you got to see this, but
I did.
He was suspended 3 games for some recruiting violations. Also violating head coach responsibility rules. So that's a little bit of a pending, investigation. It's been going on for a while now, and they're going to go ahead and tag Penny Hardaway with a 3-game suspension. I know some of that dates back to, I believe, 2021, if I'm not mistaken. But yes. What are your initial thoughts right here with Penny?
Well, look, to me, this is the fact that he's getting 3 games shows that the NCAA does not think that this is a major issue. If you look at what it was he went to a couple of players' homes when they were juniors in high school for visits. Now, the rules say that in-home visits, technically in-home visits for juniors have to be at the high school, not in their homes, because they feel like if you're actually at their home, it gives an unfair recruiting advantage. So certainly he he made a mistake, made an error, knowingly or not knowingly, I don't know, but I don't think this is a big deal. I think the NCAA is saying, look, slap on the wrist, 3 games, and then let's move on with it. So as far as the other thing that you mentioned about head coach responsibilities, if there's more to come, we'll see. But as of now, I think this is a kind of a non-issue, a 3-game suspension for something back in 2021 that really was a rule violation, but not necessarily, I don't know enough about it, but not necessarily an intentional deception or something like that.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know, Penny's I love Penny Hardaway. I think he's a fantastic coach. I think he was a great pickup by Memphis back in, I believe, 2018 after Tubby Smith, was done there at Memphis. So I think Penny's a heck of a coach there. I think the Tigers have got himself a good one. But yeah, I think it's just kind of the NCAA, that's their way of saying, we don't want to, and look, the first 3 games of the year basically are meaningless. I haven't looked at their schedule. Memphis is probably playing 3 games they're probably going to blow someone out in.
Or it could even be a tournament, who knows?
Yeah. I think this isn't the first time, though, that something is going on at Memphis. I believe didn't James Wiseman a few years ago get in trouble at Memphis or something? I can't remember the entire ordeal, but
yeah, I don't remember. But it does.
I think something. I'm trying to find this thing on Wiseman. I can't remember. I just remember Wiseman got in a little bit of trouble at Memphis, but yeah, just a little slap on the wrist. Glad nothing. It's not too big of a deal, but I think this is just the NCAA showing, sending a message like, hey, you got to follow the rules. I know He didn't really do anything wrong. He didn't give him any special benefits. He just didn't meet them at the right place. So
and here, if you look at his statistics, he's led the Memphis Tigers to 5 consecutive 20-win seasons. He's 110, 52 overall, won the 2021 NIT title. So certainly, hopefully, he gets maybe a compliance officer, figures this out, because he's a great asset to Memphis, and certainly want to keep him coaching out of trouble.
Well, that's good for Penny right there. Just a little bit of a slap on the wrist right there. Memphis. I'll tell you what, Memphis is a team right there. You want to go play ball somewhere, you go play for Penny Hardaway at Memphis, you're going to have a lot of success. But last thing, talking coaches right here, is our friends down, Coach Triplett, our A&M Commerce friends down in Lake Charles at McNeese State. Of course, in the Southland Conference, Will Wade, the former LSU coach, he's the current McNeese State coach, suspended 10 games for for 3 level 1 violations right there. Wade was found to have made impermissible payments to the former fiance of a player, while also failing to cooperate in an investigation and failing to promote an atmosphere of compliance. Do you think that Will Wade, who hasn't even coached a game yet for McNeese State, do you think that he is unfairly only getting 10 games? I'm not so sure how much of it you've looked at, but Will Wade, the new McNeese State coach, is getting 10 games for 3
years. So according to the New York Times, this is part of a larger investigation with LSU, and you may have seen, that some of Les Miles's football wins have been vacated. It says, according to the New York Times, that the most serious breach for Wade was not informing the university of an alleged extortion attempt. And then this is where that hush money came in. Now, it does say, it says here that he was mostly punished for lies, misleading statements, and repeated delays in turning over documents. But there is a little bit more as far as the punishment goes. In addition to the 10-game suspension, Wade is prohibited from off-campus recruiting and has other recruiting restrictions placed on him for 2 years. But it does say that those restrictions may have less of an impact on a team relying more on the transfer portal than recruiting. But so it is a little more than the 10 games, and I always struggle with this, because my heart wants to say, look, you may be punishing McNeese State for infractions that he made at LSU, but if you don't do that, then then you just have a coach that goes in and has some unethical, does whatever, and then leaves scot-free because he goes to the new school and they don't want to punish that. So while I think it's not a perfect statement, I think these punishments have to follow the coach so that these coaches can't decide to roll the dice and do whatever they want and know that if they get in trouble, they'll just start fresh at a new university. So, I don't think that he was unfairly punished as far as the number of games. It sounds like really it could have been more as far as the game suspension, but maybe in lieu of that, they put some of these recruiting restrictions on to kind of balance it out.
Well, and this is a McNeese State Cowboy team who's not very good. I believe they finished last or second to last in the Southland Conference. So. I didn't think this maybe affects the program too terribly much. This is a program that's rebuilding right now. They're rebuilding, bringing in Will Wade from LSU. It's a great hire for McNeese. They're just going to have to, have some of the baggage that comes with hiring him from LSU. So like you're saying, he's going to have to sit out the 10 games. This is a McNeese State program that's going to take a little bit of time to rebuild, and I think at the end of the day, it's a good hire for McNeese. Maybe he's got a little bit of, issues that they've got to deal with, get past. But, once he's able to rebuild this program, he's going to have lots of contacts down there in Louisiana. He's not too far from Baton Rouge, just heading over to Lake Charles and going to be leading that McNeese State program. So I think it's just a little bit of a bump in the road for McNeese. It's not too big of a deal for them as they bring just a little bit of baggage with them. Will Wade over from LSU.
And in the end, as we talked about earlier, very forgiving. If this is the kind of last issue he has, and he goes on and has a long career, whether it's with McNeese State or elsewhere, this won't be something that they talk about when I talk about the totality of his career, as long as he doesn't continue to make these types of mistakes. So, serve your punishment, your 10 games, and move on and try and get that program headed in the right direction.
All right. It's time to talk a little bit of NBA now. Of course, we know we are a college basketball podcast, but, the NBA, where do these players come from? Most of them, they come from college basketball. So, Coach Tripp will recap a little bit of the NBA draft, which happened last night. Of course, you and I are pretty darn pumped up with who the number one overall pick was. Let's give our initial thoughts right here with the Spurs. Victor Wembanyama, the whatever you want to call him, guard, center, forward, whatever you want to call him, he can play everything out of the top league there in France, the Metropolitans 92 squad, number one pick in the draft, probably the highest, if not the biggest prospect of all time. They said, at least since LeBron, if not more than LeBron. He's got to prove it before we can put him anywhere on LeBron's level. But the biggest prospect since LeBron James. What are your first initial thoughts with Wemby?
Well, first of all, a generational talent. Now let's kind of pull back a little bit on the LeBron comparison as far as even just the prospect. But you're right. He has all the skills, all the tools. The only thing maybe is sometimes players, you look at Ogden a few years ago, some of these really big players, hopefully he's not injury prone. He's pretty slight, but barring that, I see no reason that he can't anchor this franchise for, the next 15 years. He can do it all. He can defend. He can handle the ball. He can shoot. He can block. So he is I think for whoever was going to get him, which obviously we knew it was the Spurs after the lottery, but certainly can turn the fortunes of a franchise around in year one. And for those that are not Spurs fans, you should be. But once they got the news that they're going to get the number one pick, Tim Duncan has opted to come in and work with him. So between him and Pop, I think you really couldn't have put him in a better situation, at least to keep him on the straight and narrow, and certainly from fundamentals from which he already has. And then you have Tim Duncan tutoring him. I think, what a great situation for him. What a great situation for San Antonio. A no-brainer of a pick. And I think it's going to impact the franchise positively immediately.
Man, how lucky have we been? I mean, 1987, we get David Robinson. 10 years later, Tim Duncan we get the number 1 pick, and then how about this? 2023, we get Victor Wembanyama. We've been lucky 3 times, and we've been spoiled as Spurs fans for a long time. I know we've had 2 or 3 years of a bad stretch, but gosh, almighty, Trip. I mean, since 1997, we've been pretty spoiled. And I expect us here in a few years. I don't think the Spurs are going to be contenders or anything right off the bat. We still got a lot of work to go, an uphill battle, but maybe 3-4 years down the line, we can get this thing figured out. But what was outside of Wemby? What was maybe your biggest surprise? The pick maybe you liked the best for a certain team. What caught your attention?
I'll tell you what caught my attention wasn't necessarily a specific pick. It was all the trades that went on, with Smart leaving Boston and the Golden State. I know it was after, getting Chris Paul. I mean, Poole leaving. I mean, I think really kind of all the activity leading up to the draft and then just prior to the draft were certainly I think got my attention more than the draft. There wasn't anything that necessarily shocked me as far as picks, and at least in the first 10 picks. But I was more surprised with some of the bold moves some of these NBA teams made, and maybe they thought with the draft they were going to fix some of those problems. But that's really where I was shocked. And I don't mean that shocked in a good way. I didn't really think any of those moves were really all that good for the teams involved. I don't know that they got better, by getting however old, 38-year-old Chris Paul. Certainly a great player. I don't know that he fits really all that well with that up tempo, and certainly Smart was the heart and soul of Boston. So I think that's really what I took away was less about the specific picks and more about the jockeying these teams did, prior to.
Yeah, and I think this was one of the more stacked up drafts that we've had in a long time. This was a really good draft class, 2023. I know. Look at some of Drew's picks. Our friend over there on the Lowdown, the actual Lowdown, our sister show. He went with he had a pretty good top 10, and he's sending us over his lottery picks. We'll run through his and compare them to what actually happened. He did. Drew did go with Wemby overall, number 1. No shocker there. Brandon Miller, which I thought there was actually, if I'm not mistaken, there was a lot of talk that I thought Scoot Henderson had made up a lot of ground that he was possibly going to go number 2. He ends up going 3 to the Blazers. No surprise there after Miller went 2nd, but Drew did go with Miller 2, Scoot 3rd. How about this as well? We also got the Thompson twins going back to back. Amen Thompson goes to the Rockets, and then Sir Thompson goes to the Pistons. Both spent their last year in the G League over there.
Overtime elite. Yep.
Yeah. That's what a lot of players are doing nowadays. They're just going straight to the overtime elite. They're going straight to the G League. I know we got a little bit of talk later on with our C note topic, college basketball news of the evening. We're going to talk a little bit about some players that are opting to go over to the NBL over in Australia a little bit rather than going to college basketball. But I'll go down the rest of Drew's list right here. Drew's texting in and listening right there. He went with Whitmore, Cam Whitmore, who actually fell all the way to 20. He had him at 6. Oh, I missed one as well. He had Taylor Hendricks, as his number 5 pick. Hendricks ended up falling to 9 to the Utah Jazz out of UCF. Then Drew had Anthony Black. I thought that was pretty spot on. He was just one person off as he ended up going to Orlando. Had the other Thompson at 8, Walker 9, Lively 10, who ended up going, to the Mavericks. You had Wallace going 11, Grady Dick 12, Balal, the other Frenchman, going 13, and then Bufkin going 14. So that's pretty spot on. Drew did pretty good right there in his mock draft with what he thought right there. But I'll tell you what, I think in the top 10, the one I really like is Anthony Black going to the Magic out of Arkansas. They're obviously going to be building around Paulo Banchero there in Orlando, but I think Anthony Black is a great pickup for Orlando right there. I think the guard out of Arkansas, I think he led the nation in minutes played. So they're going to throw him to the wolves right off the bat. He's a good scorer out of Arkansas. That backcourt, with him and Ricky Council, gave a lot of teams fits there in the SEC, and I think that's a really good pickup for Orlando. We'll talk a little bit about the Mavs. I'm sure we got a lot of people on here listening from Texas that might not necessarily be Spurs fans. They had a couple picks in the top 10. You had Derek Lively going to the Mavericks. Originally was drafted by Oklahoma City, but the Mavericks traded back, I believe, to get that. Derek Lively, the second out of Duke, and I think that's a really good pickup for the Mavericks right there. Lively, he's an athletic big out of Duke. He's a really good defensive player. I was listening to Nico Harrison earlier, the GM for the Mavericks. They're really excited about the defense and athleticism he can bring right off the bat for Dallas. And I think that's something they need. Jason Kidd and his squad really kind of struggled. They're one of the best offensive teams in the league, obviously with Luka handling the ball, but I think bringing a little bit of defense in there with Lively can really help them out defensively. And they said they think he can really shoot the ball a lot better than what his percentage says. And I think Jason Kidd, once they get a hold of him, Michael Finley, all those guys there in Dallas can really help out Derek Lively. And Drew, keep the comments coming in. We know you're kind of sitting behind the scenes tonight, but tell us a little bit more in the comments, Drew, about this Oliver Maxey Prosper out of Marquette. I know he's another athletic guy from Shaka Smart up there at Marquette. I know that's another good pickup. The Mavs are looking to get better defensively. So that's our little bit of Mavs insight right there. Was there, Coach Tripp, was there any other names that caught your attention there in round one?
No, not really. I mean, I think the Houston Rockets, the Cam Whitmore is certainly, I think, really good for them. Sticking with Texas NBA teams. I think he will certainly complement that team, and he last year I think they said 255 field goal attempts plus 64 free throws. So he's certainly one that can coming out of Villanova can hopefully add some firepower to a team that certainly needs it. But no, I mean, not a whole lot. As I said, it was more about what the NBA teams were doing prior to the draft that really surprised me and kind of left me scratching my head.
I really like Keontae George out of Baylor going to Utah. That's another one that really caught my eye. I mean, that's instant offense for Utah right there. Keontae George can just straight up score the basketball, and that's gonna be really good for Utah right there. Get a scoring guard for them right off the bat. He'll be able to develop even more there with that firepower there in Utah. They've got a good front office there. I know Quinn Snyder's a good coach up there with the Jazz. They'll be able to develop him really fast. I thought Marcus Sasser, the guard out of Houston, going to
I thought that was a curious move.
Yeah, going to the Pistons right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the Pistons are a little bit of a rebuild right now. They're going to be drafting probably up in the lottery for most years. But, I feel like they got a little bit of unfortunate in the draft. They had the best odds to get the number one overall pick, ended up falling to 5. They get Asur Thompson, out of the G League, and then they get a good one right there with Marcus Sasser. I think those are two good ones right there to get.
Yeah, I thought they could have a little better than Sasser. Certainly a lot of energy, but I think it maybe just some time to refine his game a little bit, and certainly when he gets to the NBA, they'll they'll hopefully fix that for him. So a lot of upside, but I think very raw.
All right, that's our draft talk. I know. Watch the Lowdown with Drew and BJ for more NBA. I'm sure they're going to be talking about the draft for the next few weeks, and getting forward to the regular season there for the NBA. We'll talk a little bit of NBA for you guys, but we're obviously going to focus on the college side of things more often. All right, Coach's Corner, our segment hosted by the coach himself, Coach Triplett. Take it away.
All right. So, as we start kind of thinking about, we talked a little bit last week about coaches and kind of in the top 10 all-time wins. We talked about active coaches and then all-time. And I kind of just got to thinking about, I'm a little bit older, and I wanted to point out, and I'm going to tie this all together. But the first thing is, and you may already know this, but if you don't, the most lopsided victory in the history of a men's championship in the NCAA tournament, not speaking about the NIT, is 30 points. It was, I think, 103-73 lopsided victory, and it was way back when, and it may be from a team you do not expect, from a coach you do not expect. Tyler, do you know what I'm talking about? You know who it is?
I can't draw it. I can't get it off the top of my head. You said 30 points.
30 points.
You know what era? Or can you give me a hint?
It was late 80s, early 90s, end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s.
Good chance it involved Duke.
It did involve Duke. So here's the deal. Duke was on the losing side of the most lopsided victory in men's college basketball championship history. A 30-point loss to UNLV, had Larry Johnson, coached by Coach Tarkanian. Now, I bring this up only because oftentimes, as fans, you get so wrapped up in just one season or one game. Well, the next 2 years in a row, Duke won the national championship. And then they have now, under Coach K, before he retired, a total of 5 championships. So my point in all this, and I'm going to tie it into some NBA stuff here, is that sometimes, as painful it is, a team, a player, a coach has to take their licks, maybe struggle through some downtimes before they can really establish themselves. You talked about UConn maybe now becoming considered a dynasty. Obviously, San Antonio Spurs, they could never get past the Houston Rockets until they finally did. If you look at in the NBA and the Eastern Conference, in the early to mid 80s, it was the Boston Celtics in the East, usually the Lakers in the West, and Detroit just could not get past them. Boom, Detroit finally figures that out. They win their championships, and lo and behold, below them are or next in line trying to get past, can't get past, are the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan, and eventually they do. So the reason I bring this up, just as a coach, I've been on the losing side of some things, and of course we've won some games, but sometimes people, whether it's fans, whether it's administration, players are so quick to make a snapshot judgment on the ability of a coach or a team or a player based off of a very small sample size. And what we saw with Duke, which is obviously an extreme example though, is, man, trust the process. You brought this coach in to do a job. You hired him, so give him the tools, the support, let him work through it. Now, look, no one is probably going to fire somebody who made it to the championship, but I could see where, back then people thinking that he got out coached, and now the idea would be laughable to think that Coach K ever got out coached. So anyway, that's just my coach's corner there. I wanted to talk a little bit about some past trivia, and then the idea of as fans and administration, let's get out of this knee-jerk mentality when something goes wrong that we have to replace everything, or we have to replace the coach, or this player can't play. Let the thing play out. We've seen time and time and again, sometimes it takes time, but when it works, the reward is sky high.
Well, let's give a little bit of love to Jerry Tarkanian right there. I mean, you got me on that one. I hadn't remembered it was that UNLV running Rebs team, but shoot, I remember Jerry. Well, I don't remember him, back in the 80s. Wasn't around yet. But, I mean, heck, Jerry Tarkanian, an absolute legend there at UNLV. He's recently retired. Man, he hadn't been retired 10 years, I don't believe. But he's one of the all-time winningest coaches of all time, over 700 wins by my count, an absolute legend. So it's not like Coach K was out there losing to a schmuck or anything. He was losing to a legend in Jerry Tarkanian. Those UNLV teams in the late 80s, early 90s were pretty darn good.
They definitely were. I believe Stacey Ogman was also there. Mm-hmm. But, they were formidable. Mm-hmm. But now when we talk about, dynasties, we're talking about Duke, not UNLV.
Yeah.
I just found it ironic that probably the best coach in the history of men's college basketball is on the losing side of the most lopsided game in championship history. So it just goes to show, man, everybody at this Division I level can coach. Everybody can play. Sometimes you just get people that you get a collection of players that can play, or you get the right coaching staff, but it doesn't mean these other guys can't do the job.
Well, you're absolutely right. You nail it perfectly, Tripp. A lot of the time these teams have to get over the hump of someone. I love the comparison back to the 80s and 90s with the NBA. You had the Celtics and the Lakers who pretty much ran most of the 80s, and then the bad boys Pistons had to do something. So they went in there and got more physical, got tougher, and then it got them a couple championships, and then right behind them was Jordan. Jordan had to bulk up. If you remember, he had his fits with the Pistons, couldn't get past them. So, he had to go and put on a lot of weight, a lot of muscle. Had to add some firepower there to the Bulls. But you're right. I mean, I've been in some battles with you out there, playing basketball. There's a lot of times there's a team you need to get beat by. There is such thing as good losses. You'll say that as a coach. There are good losses. There's losses that wake you up, and you nailed it perfectly there with the Coach K comparison.
So, all right. Well, that's that. Let's move on.
All right. Hey, so this is not college basketball, but it does involve a lot of college basketball. Have you had the chance, Coach Tripp, to look at the TBT, the basketball tournaments? Have you gotten the opportunity to ever look at that at all?
So I haven't. When we talked pre-show, you kind of mentioned this, and I went and looked at the website, and this was sadly on my part, I was unaware of this, and so talk us a little bit about it, what you like about it, and why should we care?
So it like I said, it does involve a lot of college basketball, and I'll tell you what, I've actually these last years really gotten invested in it. So TBT, obviously, it stands for the basketball tournament, and a lot of the time it involves former players who have played college basketball. They're basically, teams are put together. There's 64 of them typically. Very similar to the NCAA tournament, March Madness. 64 is what we used to have in March Madness, up to 68 now. So 64 teams in the TBT. There's a general manager. It's an open tournament. Anybody can apply for this. I'm not exactly sure how the application process goes through, but I do know a general manager will put together a team, and you basically go play for $1 million. So a lot of the time it involves former college players who, you won't ever see NBA players in it. The only time you'll ever see NBA players in it are retired NBA players, but lots of the time they're former college players that all played together. I've really gotten invested in it because of, my big fandom and ties to Texas Tech. So Texas Tech, college basketball, one of the best teams out there, doesn't necessarily have too many players out there in the NBA. You've got your Jarrett Culvers, you've got your Darvin Ham running the Lakers. So you do have a little bit of talent out there as of recent years. But for the most part, Texas Tech has a lot of guys that go play overseas and have a successful NBA career. Some of them go to the G League and have G League careers. But it's an opportunity for a lot of these guys to reunite with one another, reunite with their fellow alumni, and go and play in a March Madness kind of atmosphere and play for $1 million.
So here's what it says on the website about this particular season. Celebrating its 10th anniversary this summer, TBT 23 will feature 75 players with NBA experience and 34 college alumni teams, both of which are TBT records. The field, once again, will feature 64 teams squaring off in a single elimination format. And so it looks like the games run anywhere beginning July 19th through the end of July. And the cities you can see this in, and you can find this at their website, but Wichita, Louisville, West Virginia, Syracuse, Dayton, Lubbock. So I got some ties there. Xavier, and then the championship looks like it'll be in Philadelphia, August 2nd and 3rd. So if you haven't checked it out like me, certainly hop on the website, go check it out. And I imagine if there's a way to put some money down on this, I imagine at TM_Swish knows how and can help you out there as well.
Can help you guys with any they do have it. Vegas, you go out there to Vegas, if you need any of you guys have bookies out there, they do a lot of times allow you to put down some money on that. But yeah, some of these teams will go through some of the teams right here. Of course, not all of them. Like, and I was mentioned before in a few comments, when I said there aren't any NBA players, I mean like current NBA players, not any NBA players that are if this is an off-season, league for them. It's just, you will see some former NBA players. It's just not necessarily always a lot of NBA players that there are some that played. I think Mike Bibby played in it, if I'm not mistaken. I think
wow.
Right. But there are some, he's probably the biggest name, but there are some players that did play in the NBA that do come back and play in it, but a lot of them aren't current NBA players. Some of the teams that are in it, the Aftershocks, of course, for Wichita State, Arkansas, they're called Team Arkansas. And I'm going through a lot of the teams that I recognize the ties to their university right there. Obviously, there's a lot more on there that have ties. There's Ram Up, I believe they're associated with VCU, Virginia Commonwealth. Mass Street, I assume that's got to do with UMass. Could be wrong on that, but that's just me. I know the LA Cheaters, they've been around for a while. I'm not sure who they're associated with, but the LA Cheaters, I know they've been a team that has been in this tournament for quite a while. Oh, Drew over here saying Jared Sullinger did play in it. So, of course, he's a former Ohio State Buckeye, and then he had a decent little NBA career, but I believe he played in it after he was done in the NBA. Also, some teams going around. We've got JUCO Products. I like that team name right there. So you got some JUCO guys squadding them together. You've got a We Are D3 team. So you got some D3 Hoopers. Those are all teams from the Wichita region. Not all the teams, but those are just teams that I can kind of put two and two together where they're from. That's in the Wichita region. The Lubbock region right here, Coach Tripp. Go through some of these that I'll be able to tie together. Air Raiders, they're, of course, Lubbock. Let's go with the rest. Zip them up. Oh, who are they? I know who they are, but I'm drawing a blank. They're not Gonzaga, I don't think. The Money Team. That's funny. Maybe Floyd Mayweather runs that one. Austin's Own. I know they're associated with the city of Austin. Any Hoopers that have been from Austin and have also played for UT, they're Austin's Own. Fort Wayne Champs. I believe that's, Indiana, Fort Wayne. And then I believe there's a G League team in Fort Wayne. So they might have a little bit of ties there. I don't know if you're looking at the same list. You can go through some of them as well.
I am looking at it. I think you mentioned Bleed Green, North Texas. HBC United. So
Boeheim's Army.
Oh, man.
They've been in it, I think, since the very start. Lots of Syracuse grads right there. That's pretty cool. Boeheim's Army right there. The Rhodey Way, they're Rhode Island. Not sure if there's any more on here that I can tie with. The Commonwealth, I'm not sure who they're associated with. Best Virginia, that's cool. Best Virginia right there.
That is good. So, yeah, anybody interested, certainly check out the website, the tournament.com, and you can kind of get ideas on dates. You can buy tickets. They also offer TST, which is the soccer tournament, at the same site. So it looks like they're definitely trying to offer alternatives from the collegiate and professional only levels, but still high talent tournaments. So it should be pretty interesting.
I think I'm real big on this right here because it's, if you're a big fan of college basketball, you're going to see a lot of guys that you're like, oh, I remember him back in college. He was cold, he was really good. And that's why I really like watching this right here because, us, being a huge college basketball fan, there's a lot of names on there that you recognize that maybe didn't have, outstanding NBA careers, but they were definitely really good college players. You can definitely know their names. So definitely check that out. This summer it's going to be a lot of fun here coming up in just a few weeks. So that's the basketball tournament, TBT. Like you said, Coach Tripp said you can go to their website right there. Looking forward to that here in the month of July, kicking things off. All right, Coach Tripp. I wanted to introduce a new segment right here. We didn't go over it last week, but it's something we can definitely get going. It's called CBB Twitter. So we're going to go over the world of college basketball on the world of Twitter. Of course, 2023, we're in a new age of social media where Twitter is a big usage in our daily lives, especially if you're sports fans. You get a lot of your news from Twitter pretty quickly. So I'll go over a few things that I've recently seen on Twitter, and you are more than welcome to throw in some of the things that you've seen on Twitter as of late. A lot of the times it's going to be stuff we might have already recapped. Of course, a lot of the coaching news that we went over at the beginning of the show. But so, yeah, it's going to be CBB Twitter. We'll usually go over it towards the end of the show. Coming up next, we're going to have the C-Note College basketball news of the evening to wrap up tonight's show. But the first thing right here, college basketball Twitter news right here. It involves more coaching. And how about this right here? Saw it with our good friends over at College Basketball Report. They're one of my favorite follows on Twitter. I get a lot of my news from them, a lot of updates. There's a lot of great Twitter things that you can get from all these guys out here. John Ronstein, I know he's great. There's a lot of guys that you can follow on college basketball Twitter. But this comes from our friends over at College Basketball Report. How about this right here? We keep it with the world of coaching in the Big 12. Coach, how about this, Coach Tripp? If you had to pick one coach out of the Big 12 right now, who are you rolling with? This is just my prelude. I haven't gotten to what I'm talking about, but who are you rolling with?
Okay, so Big 12 and Baylor, obviously, you got to go with Oklahoma.
That's pretty good ones.
Yeah, there are.
You're saying your best coach, your favorite coach in the Big 12. Who's your favorite coach?
That is, and make sure nobody left on me. I'm gonna say his name escapes me now that you put me on the spot because I wasn't prepared for the guy, the Baylor.
Well, that's exactly where I was going. He's my favorite coach in the Big 12. Of course, I've got a few ties to Baylor, and this is where it really, really kind of I've got the opportunity to meet Scott Drew plenty of times. That's who I'm rolling with. He's my favorite coach in the Big 12. I've got some ties to Baylor with my father, who's a PGA professional who used to be with the University of Baylor. They're not my favorite team. Still guns up, baby. But Baylor and Scott Drew right here. We get this right here. How about this? So from College Basketball Report, just with the recent NBA draft, Baylor's basketball draft history before Scott Drew. This is a tweet, of course, like I said, from College Basketball Report. From 1906 to 2003, 98 seasons, that is, before Scott Drew got there to Waco, they only had 13 draft picks, 3 first-round picks, and 1 lottery pick. How about this? Scott Drew with Baylor basketball, their draft history since 2004 with him at the helm. 20 seasons that Scott Drew has been there. They've had 13 draft picks, 6 first-round picks, and 4 lottery picks. You didn't even have that for 98 seasons at Baylor, and Scott Drew has done that in 20 years. How about that right there? That is a culture guy. That's a life-changing coach right there with Scott Drew and Waco.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And prior to Drew's arrival, Baylor was not necessarily known as a basketball destination. And obviously they're a small.
He had to take over a mess there in Waco. Remember, Baylor was on the point of having the depth.
Oh yeah, they had the I believe it was Dave Bliss issue where one teammate had murdered another. Oh yeah, and so yeah, what he's been able to do is remarkable. And then you obviously they have scholarships and things like that, but Baylor is a not a state school, so I mean it's a smaller school. Not everybody can afford to go there. So yeah, with the job he's done there is amazing, no doubt about it.
I love Scott Drew. He's had a lot of talent go to the NBA right here. We just talked about Keontae George being a first-round pick going to the Utah Jazz. He is a culture guy there in Waco. You look at Jerome Tang, who's up there at Kansas State, a product of Scott Drew. He sat right next to Drew on his sidelines for quite a while there down there in Waco, and he's right off the bat, Jerome Tang making a difference up there. I love Jerome Tang as well up there in Manhattan, Kansas, leading that Kansas State squad. So Scott Drew, what a run he's had in 20 seasons at Baylor. If you want to win and give yourself a chance to win a national championship, you go play for Scott Drew. All right. How about this, Coach Tripp? I saw this as well. I loved this signing, and I know if we've got any Texas Longhorns / San Antonio Spurs fans out there, which I know they meshed together really well. I loved this undrafted pick the Spurs had, as the Spurs signed Serge Jabari Rice to I believe a summer league contract. So the Spurs get a local product, Serge Jabari Rice, who played at New Mexico State before transferring over his last year at Texas. Instant scorer there at the University of Texas. I love this pickup for the Spurs, getting an undrafted player.
Okay. Yeah, that's anytime you can get a legitimate potential impact player who is not drafted. I mean, you're ahead of the game right there. And certainly you get someone with ties to the area, even better. So kudos to them for that. I've got one for you here. This, according to CBS Sports College Basketball, last night, or the NBA draft is the first time that University of Michigan basketball had 2 top 15 picks since 1994. So last night was Kobe Buffkin and Jet Howard. And then in 1994, it was Jalen Rose and Juwan Howard. So those guys, obviously, in 94, they were part of that Fab Five team. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I mean, Michigan, a pretty prominent basketball school. So I was a little surprised that it had been so long since they had 2 top 15 picks in the same draft.
Michigan's one of those guys, they're kind of like what I like to compare. They kind of started this probably. They're one of those programs that they're in the tournament every year. If you remember, there's been some great moments with Michigan basketball. Trey Burke, a lot of these guys, they really show up in March. There are a lot of teams that keep around older players, so they might not have one and done guys that go straight to the draft and have a lot of NBA success, but they're have a lot of players go there to Michigan that spend a lot of time there. That's why they're one of the better programs year in, year out. But like you said, yeah, there's not too many Michigan players that get drafted pretty early. Coach Tripp, how about this one right here? This comes also once again from our friends over at College Basketball Report on Twitter. You'll like this one right here. Maybe you can give us some insight. Who is the most hated coach in college basketball? And can you guess right here? I won't make you guess. The cover picture is John Calipari there for the University of Kentucky. But who do you think are some of the most hated coaches in college basketball?
Obviously, yes, Calipari. I would say, let me think here.
Well, they also put on this picture right here, and you got Penny Hardaway, and you also got Juwan Howard.
Juwan Howard for sure. I think he's got to be one of the most hated. Just his stepping over the line sometimes for sure. Obviously, before he retired, hated meaning respected in this case would have been Krzyzewski, just because you could never outcoach him, you could never get a leg up, but really that's a sign of respect, not necessarily hate. I'm trying to think of.
I think Calipari is a great cover photo. I think there's a lot of guys on there that just do not like Calipari, rightfully so. I think he's a great coach, but he just rubs people the wrong way. I think Bob Knight would be probably a good one to maybe put on this.
Oh list. Yeah, if you're going with ones that are no longer coaching, certainly Bobby Knight would definitely be one. For sure.
I'm not the biggest fan of Huggins either. You know, I respect him, but Huggins was kind of rubbed people the wrong way.
Bruce Pearl.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
I think certainly.
Yeah. I know a lot of people don't like Rick Barnes, which is kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, that's a little bit surprising to me.
I've heard a lot of negative things over the years about Rick Barnes, you know, especially by his time at Texas. I think he's a great coach. I know behind the scenes he was pretty rough on his players. Now, not rough as in nothing physical, but just a tough, hard-nosed coach. But I mean, shoot, Rick Barnes has been one of the best coaches of my generation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
At Texas and now at Tennessee, but
I think you could probably put Jim Boeheim in there.
Yeah,
a little bit. So, all right, I got one more for you. This is also from CBS. Right. This is national championships by seed. So you know how many times the number one seed has won it. Boom, boom, boom. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So I think we would probably all pick that the number one seed probably has the most. So you would be correct. 26 times the number one seed has won it since 1979. But according to this, seeds 9 through 16 have never won it.
Wow.
Since 1979. Yeah. So an 8 seed has won it once. Yeah. And that was
Villanova.
Do what?
I thought he was UConn.
7 seed won it once. It was UConn.
That was it. Yeah.
2 6 seeds, a 5 seed, never.
Wow.
Yep.
They had a chance this year. San Diego State had a chance.
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought that was again. This is CBS Sports College Basketball. They tweeted this out. So anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting that no 5 seed and no 9 through 16 seeds ever won it.
I think you said only 1 8.
According to this, and it was Villanova in '85.
Huh. That UConn team with Kimball Walker was my guess, but you said they were a 7, and then I thought there was a Calipari. Maybe Calipari had an 8 seed lose. Maybe that was it. I can't remember. But wow, that's interesting. I'm shocked that I'm shocked there wasn't a 9 seed or something roll in there at one point. That's really interesting. That's a cool list right there. I'm shocked, like you said, there's never a 5 or anything. It probably won't be too long. We had a 9 seed, I believe, in the championship this year. With I'm drawing a blank. The Florida FAU.
Oh yeah.
Seed right there. So that's a good list right there, Tripp. I like that one. I like that. We'll have to power rank our national champions next. How about that? We'll have to say all right. Was this national champion one of the better ones? That kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right. We'll move on to the C note, our final topic of the evening. C note stands for college news of the evening. So we'll round things out right there. We're just going to go through some of the things that are in the world of college basketball, some of the major topics, of course, like we went over a lot of the coaches at the beginning of the show, but how about this? We'll lead things off. One of the best prospects, Alex Tui, spurns Gonzaga as he goes to the NBL. Top international basketball prospect Alex Tui has decommitted from Gonzaga and will go to the NBL, the Australian National Basketball League, instead of going to Gonzaga right there and play for Mark Few, the 19-year-old from Australia. What are your thoughts on that right there as he picks Australia over Gonzaga?
Well, a good friend of ours from our past life with this was a big Gonzaga fan, so I'm sure he's upset about that. Man, you mentioned it earlier about some of these teams or some of these players getting drafted coming out of these developmental leagues, and so I think if your goal is to get to the league as quickly as possible and you have the legitimate ability, I guess I understand it, but I think you are potentially robbing yourself of the experience of college basketball, even if it's a one and done. The experience of the tournament, which is the greatest playoff thing in all sports. So I think maybe I understand the thought process, but I don't agree with it. And I think, turning down Gonzaga that's tough to do, because that's big time there. So I think I understand the thought process that they feel that he is talented enough to get there, get him up against some other players that are maybe a cut below the NBA players, but maybe a cut above many college players. So maybe they feel that'll spur his development a little quicker. But gosh, I think it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, that's a really good league over there in Australia with the NBL. But I'm like you, pass up on college basketball. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity right there. All right, moving on to the next one. This goes in tie with Bob Huggins in West Virginia. West Virginia point guard Kerr Kriisa. Of course, Kerr Kriisa, who has not played a game yet for West Virginia. If you know him being the point guard there for Arizona the last few years, the sharpshooter there for the Wildcats. He had not played a game yet for the Mountaineers, but he did transfer this offseason to go play for Bob Huggins, as said that he will enter the transfer portal and will not be penalized. Says West Virginia players such as Kerr Kriisa have a 30-day window to transfer because of a coaching change. So he's given 30 days to pick a new school. Do you like the fact that he's leaving? Or, not necessarily him himself, but do you like the fact that some players are able to leave after a coaching change?
I actually do, because I felt like that used to be something that was so wrong, where a player would commit, go to a school, and then that coach leave, and maybe that player went because of that coach, and there was no penalty on the coach, but then the player was stuck. So I like that it's not necessarily carte blanche. You can't leave. This 30-day window seems reasonable to me. And if he went there because he wanted to be developed or play for Bob Huggins or in that system, and he's no longer there, I think he should have the opportunity to reevaluate. So I like the ability for players to do that, because for years coaches had that ability and players didn't. I thought that was extremely unfair.
I love it too. Personal experience speaking from that. I went through a lot of coaching changes at A&M Commerce, and lots of times it crossed my mind following a coach somewhere, and ultimately my heart was with Commerce and ended up staying. But I think, like you're saying, players are should be given an opportunity, because at the end of the day, you're thinking, who are you being recruited by? You're being recruited by a certain coach. These players are wanting to go play for these coaches. So I like it. I think giving them the opportunity to decommit or go somewhere else. In Kerr Kriisa's instance, he's able to transfer somebody else within 30 days of a coaching change. So, all right, moving on to this next one right here, a colleague of mine over at ESPN College Basketball. I guess you can call him that. He's a little bit bigger name than I am when it comes to calling college basketball for ESPN. But our good friend Dick Vitale, the Hall of Fame voice, said yesterday that he'll be sidelined for about 2 months. We, of course, Dick Vitale, who had some cancer, was able to beat cancer. So Dick Vitale was going to be sidelined for a couple months following some surgeries on his vocal cords. So I love it personally. We want Dick Vitale. We want those vocal cords getting as good as possible. Dickie V, we want you yelling there on the sidelines. We want you getting fired up. He's one of the best.
Absolutely, the best who's ever done it, and it's not March Madness without Dickie V there giving his picks and talking about his diaper dandies and awesome baby, that kind of stuff. So certainly our thoughts and prayers are with him, Coach. Well, they haven't been coaching a while, but Coach Vitale, hopefully you recover quickly and get back to doing what you love.
I'm thrilled to see him back in college basketball. We got to see him briefly a little bit at the end of last year, and we thought we were going to be able to get him full time. Looks like we probably will. He's just going to be sitting out for a couple months with his vocal cords being repaired. So that's good news for Dick Vitale. We hope to see you back there on the sidelines here coming up shortly. All right, how about this right here? Last one is a 5-star forward. Jaron Stevenson will play for Alabama, has committed to Alabama, and will reclassify into the class of 2023. This was as of 2 days ago on Wednesday. The 6'10" power forward chose Alabama over North Carolina and Virginia. So Nate Oates is getting him a good one right here. He's big into analytics, and he's going to get a guy to come in there right off the bat and replace Brandon Miller.
Missed opportunity. He could have gone to North Carolina. Now he's going to no. Congratulations to him. I mean, obviously he had his choice of some really good schools and selected where he thought was the best fit for him. And so, good for him and too bad for my Tar Heels.
How about Alabama kind of flying under the radar as one of the better programs?
No doubt.
I thought we got rid of. I thought football was bad enough. We got to deal. Now we got to deal with basketball now.
No doubt.
Good things going down there in Tuscaloosa. But
absolutely,
Coach Tripp, I'll let you wrap us up for the evening.
All right. Well, listen. Episode 2 of the Lowdown CBB off-season coverage is in the books. Hopefully, you will join us each and every week. You can catch us on YouTube. Also, we will post this, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts if you don't catch it live. But please, as we talked about, we've got Twitter handles. Please interact with us. Hit us up. Join the conversation. Talk about the sport that we all love. And as I said, the greatest playoff thing, the tournament. If you want to contact or connect directly with me, it's at NG Triplet. If you want to, where's
I'm over there somewhere.
Yeah, it is at TM _swish. Give me a second. I'll try to find it. I don't know why
While you're looking at me, I will say make sure to listen to our friends every Thursday, 2 p.m. The sister program, the mothership, the Lowdown. Make sure to listen to them on Thursdays. We are typically going to be on Wednesdays. We had a little bit of weather issues down here in Central Texas. That's why we are now recording today. And so we apologize that we weren't able to broadcast you guys on Wednesday. It actually worked out pretty good for us because we got some more news to talk about here tonight.
Absolutely. Here's if you want to connect directly to our Twitter, and then here's T-Max at TM _swish. You already know who he is, hitting off threes and draining threes. Thank you so much for joining us. And let me check this comment here, make sure see if there's anything we need to address before we get on out of here. Okay. All right. So anyway, thank you guys. We will see you next time. We will put out the announcements. Please be part of the conversation and join us. Until next time, T-Mac, I'll see you.